All right. So as far as this goes, if you were to go over some topics, I was looking over some news. There's not a lot of news. I mean, it's only midweek, so if you were looking at the structure of how you want to do this, what are some of your inputs on it?
I think just the idea of where we are and what our positions are as just regular run-of-the-mill blue-collar workers from the news media that we hear, and then just have discussions based on these current events as far as we know where we have the information.
So being that it is potentially our first, or it will be our first episode, how would you describe yourself then? Introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, just a first-generation American that is not white, not black, but some of the crazy things that come out of my mouth is like old school Gen X nonsense that would be completely hated in today's society, it seems like. Be canceled faster than you know it, but it is what it is. Still a patriot in the way I see things, and I love the Constitution for what it represents rather than all the nonsense that we see in the world today.
Okay. So the only thing I'm going to have you do is when you're speaking to this, try and speak. The microphone is, you can see right up here.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
and you can see the little bars of how it picks up. My name's Gage. I'm just here. I'm existing. Yeah.
That sounds like a Squidward moment. I just exist.
Speaking of some news topics, I saw that some of the cuts to federal funding are starting to go up. I was just on, I think it was ABC Montana, and they were saying that the federal funding for the food banks and SNAP here are starting to affect. And I don't know if they were blowing it out of proportion or maybe it was a just response, but I did see that they were talking about a 30 up to maybe 30-ish% they were saying of cut for funding.
That's a lot of money. Either way you look at that, 30% cut from people across the board, if that translates to that much cut to the people, that's a huge chunk out of entitlements. On the other hand, that's a huge savings for the department of the USDA that provides SNAP. So you can look at it from either way of, man, it's going to hurt people, but yet that's our tax money that's happening with this. So there's two sides to that story, or two different positions anyway.
Yeah, I know we're kind of have our backs against the wall and something has to fit in the budget because no one's been paying attention to the budget for quite some time. I think it was just a couple days ago that they were saying RFK Jr. was able to push through on allowing states to deny food assistance for sugary, I think he was justifying it as sugary things, but I think his big thing was trying to cut back the consumption of soda and sugary sweets that were covered under food assistance.
And I totally agree with something like that. Why would the taxpayer, who is having this money taken out of their every paycheck, and part of that goes to these assistance needs, be fed for stuff that is absolutely non-essential for people? Everybody's going to have a need somewhere down the line, but why should it be candy or Coke or whatever the soda is that they drink? It really shouldn't come out of the taxpayer to do something like that. If there's a need for like eggs or butter, milk,
The staples.
yeah, the staple foods. If you need to learn how to cook, cook. But don't let people just absorb whatever other people's money is because that's what you think you like.
Yeah, I was talking about that with someone earlier about how just providing, I don't want to completely abolish food assistance because I've heard too many stories of it actually helping the people who are in need. But I think it's just been like all things when you try and offer it to someone, there's those who will take advantage of it. And I just think that unchecked, it's been having too many people take advantage of the system. And now it's a reactionary response to where a lot of people are wanting to get rid of it entirely, which I can understand that perspective, but I do think there's still some good to having it. It's just a matter of finding the balance on the social programs.
And I totally agree with that because balance is something that is needed in today's society. Balance is not there, it is polarization. And what ends up happening with a lot of these entitlements is people take it because they might need it, and then they learn how to abuse it, and then they take advantage of it. And next thing you know, they're not looking to make themselves better. They're looking on a way how to stay on it or take advantage of that entitlement, which that's what Elon Musk is all about, is trying to get rid of the fraud. And without getting rid of that, you're going to end up in the same damn situation as what the Indians had here in this country. Federal government, here's your property, here's the extra check, here's this. Now look at them. They've lost their pride of a tribe. And that's how people will become if you're constantly absorbing entitlements. You just lose your identity and you become part of the system.
I think that's a good point to circle back to the whole UBI concept because I know it's kind of dropped out of public discourse, but it was really being pushed with the advent of AI taking everyone's jobs, and we have to have something to supplement us. But maybe it should be a good learning point to go, we as humans don't collectively do well when we're handed everything. We need to be able to work for what we have. And I think there's a certain satisfaction that comes from that. So maybe the answer isn't just always being given something or handed something, but rather just working towards a goal so you actually produce something, contribute to the society and build a better world.
Well, that's the funny thing about our modern society is that seems to be lost. In every generation that squeaks down, it seems like a part of that goes away even more and more. I mean, I'm Gen X. When the boomers were around, they thought we were lazy. Now we look down to the millennials, they seem like they're not putting out the output. And then the millennials are looking at Gen Zers going, what? Really? You think you're entitled to that? And it just seems like what happens when Generation Alpha comes around? Are they going to be like, I deserve to be whatever I want? It seems like it's progressive rather than everybody focusing on what we need to do to make ourselves great again.
Yeah, it definitely could be a mentality shift for sure. I heard someone just yesterday tell me that when was the last time that you heard someone plant an oak tree for their children or their grandchildren? I don't think anyone is planting trees in their yard for their future generations. Everyone's just looking at what they can get out of life right now. And I think that could be its own issues that's feeding this mentality.
I think the generation of today, which always seems to somehow blame the generation of yesterday, but the generation of today has lost sight of what needs to be done because they weren't given the tools to become the person that they could have been. I think they've been kind of stripped down a little bit, and then with social media, it helped them promote these concepts of what they think it should be rather than really what it is.
Yeah, there's definitely some. I mean, we're using social media. I use it more than I should. And it has a lot of perks to it, but I definitely can see uh, how would you say, maybe a hive mind, if you will. There seems to be some sort of collective conformity that comes with everyone seeing and being fed the same things as well. But maybe that's Maybe that's just me. I do have a little bit of a theory in regards to just it can't be good if we're always feeding all of our collective information we get through our phones, right? There should maybe be some deviation on that. It funnels all of our thoughts into certain things. And I mean the algorithms work really well, but I'm sure there's studies out there, but just how much it can really shape our thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody who's even listening to this, they've been on TikTok and they've been on YouTube and they've seen the same thing. It doesn't matter what platform. You start scrolling through things and it starts collectively pulling down, like you say, into a funnel. And next thing you know, you're part of the echo chamber and you're just listening to exactly the same thing or something that you want to be completely opposite against. And it's feeding you that information. But generally, it ties you into the same kind of thinking and it kind of promotes your thought pattern.
Yeah. And I don't know if there's a way to fully fix that because it seems to be almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy on these companies want to take as much time. I mean, they get paid off your screen time, right? So they're going to make the most addicting product that they can. So it's kind of what company would go against their own interests in that regard? I don't.
I don't know. Either way, it's going to circle back to the same thing. I remember Mike Savage used to say that a bird needs two wings to fly, right? So you got your left wing and your right wing. And if you keep that, the center is always the bulky part that just glides through. But we're in a situation right now where the only way to help our society, I think, is to get away from the propaganda and the machines that are feeding us this information because it's so destructive. But yet, to get rid of that, the only way you get rid of it is by, an EMP and just wipe out all electronics, and now you're back to destruction again. There's no fix on our trajectory where we're going because ultimately, both trajectories, I think, are going to align sometime together, and we're going to be in that situation, which is a scary thought.
It does seem like a lot of things that you want to talk about forecasts, they always seem to lead towards chaos and destruction. Never a unity or upbuilding. Maybe you think it could be a cultural thing or a mentality of what is it that you think could be done to shift that direction? Is it how could you fix the American trajectory of negativity in the current scenario? I know some people were pretty happy about Trump's decisions, however controversial they may be, but I feel like everyone else puts all of their weight on him as far as to what they want done. When reality is they have to make their own efforts in their own communities too. Trump might be steering the ship, but everyone has to help with the sails and man the boat too.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny situation we're in. It's like what Bill Maher was talking about. You can't even recognize the Democratic Party, right? Because they've just gone so far off the boat, right? They're just like, they're not recognizable as Democrats. They're like crazy progressive fringe stuff that used to be. And they didn't think that they were going to end up being fringe, but now that they are, they think they're normal. And they think everybody else is fascist or whatever that they want to think. But what's really amazing is what they want, they reject. So let's just say, for instance, they love the unity and the peace and the harmony. Well, that's exactly what Jesus would talk about. But they would be the first people to reject Jesus because it doesn't align up with their agenda. So it's kind of like there's this strange, push against doing what really needs to be done. Because to unify people, you have to find that common ground. And I don't see we're going to ever see that.
I think that's an interesting thing, is maybe the issue for finding the common ground is because people are going through some sort of identity, not people, but Americans are going through an identity crisis onto what they think it means to be an American. Previously, both sides of our political parties agreed what it was to be American, what the Constitution stood up for, and what we were as a nation. And it seems like there's a significant group that wants to redefine that. I think that's where a lot of our issues, turbulence, if you will, come in, is we're going to reach a crossroads onto what it'll mean to be the new American.
Which I think is a very funny topic in itself, because I think a lot of people have been misled through social media, and you hear it all the time. Save our democracy, save our democracy. They don't even understand what democracy is. They don't understand what the republic is. They don't understand what a citizen of the republic is. We are, as patriots, should love the nation that has been built. They hate it. They hate it because of what Trump is, and if it wasn't Trump, it'd be something else. There's always a political figure that one side or the other has grown into this hatred for each other, and now that their decision making is so polarized, they identify with the fringe element rather than just going, what does it take to be an American? I would rather say it's easier to be a libertarian now and just say, you do you, I do me, leave me alone. But they can't. Somebody's got to get in your face and in your business. And we see this with the Tesla destruction. I mean, come on. The guy, just because he's doing what he's doing, you see all this vandalism. That's absurd.
Yeah, it's pretty absurd. I think I see at least 2 videos every day on my TikTok feed about someone, whether it just be flipping them off, cutting them off, or just keying their car, which I think is absolutely crazy. It's unhinged.
But that is what has become normal, what used to be fringe. And that's where we are as a people of America. We have become where a huge group of people think that that's okay to destroy private property. I mean, can you imagine that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty telling that they feel emboldened to do that. At least I feel somewhat comforted by the fact that it seems culturally in mass that's looked down upon and frowned. And there have been tons of arrests following those. And I mean, I think it'll get itself sorted out, but it does beg the question, why do they feel so emboldened to go out to physically damage someone else's property in that manner? That just...
I would have to say, on the support of the crazies who do this, the governments that they're under actually have laws that prohibit people from responding to that. So if somebody comes up and keys your car, I know back in the day, if somebody's going to key your car, it was going to go down right there. And you see people who are saying, oh, why are you doing that? I'm going to call the police. You know what? I hate to say it. That should just be brought down right there. I mean, that dude should have been dropped. I hate saying it, but that's where we are in our nation. These governments have got it to where you do something like that, defend your private property, you go to jail for defending it.
Yeah, you're right. Depending on what state you're in, you can have drastically different approaches to how you handle that situation. Yeah, I would be surprised to see how that goes down in states like Montana or Florida or Texas. I know Montana and Florida have stand your ground and castle laws. I don't know about Texas.
I don't know.
Yeah, I do know that I think it was Gavin Newsom who was talking about introducing a bill, and I don't know the name. I don't remember. I just remember seeing the line where it talked about intruders. You just it would be like the opposite of Castle Lost,
Oh
where
yeah, it's a flight law.
yeah,
You have to flee. If you have every way to get out of the house, you gotta escape. Like you got an escape room out your window or something. It's like crazy ideas like that. Who comes up with these ideas that say you have to run away out of your house from a perpetrator?
you know it's it's crazy because about 10 years ago, I remember in the UK, which is completely gone off the deep end, but they had a case where a burglar broke in, hurt himself by falling in through the window or something, cut himself, and he sued the homeowner, and he won. And I thought that was the most crazy thing. I said that will never come here. That'll never happen. And what, less than a decade later, and here we are in some of our states. And I just kind of going back to that concept of what will define the new American this age are because I feel like the people who live in the Midwest will have such a radically different stance on things. How can they reconcile with people from the coast? They're so different and opposite. How can they come together in the House or Senate and have a meaningful discussion on what we need to move forward as a nation if you have such these radically different approaches to protecting yourself, your family, and your property?
And that's funny you say that because the coast has seemingly kind of changed or in this weird camouflage moment. And you were talking about Gavin Newsom. He is quite the character. So he's been up on a recall before. He stated,
Wasn't it twice, two recalls?
I don't remember, but I remember him being up for recall, and he gets back in, and he's got all these like anti Second Amendment rules and how he wants to put guns away and all these like off the wall type things that he wants to push. And now he's got his podcast out.
He has a
And
podcast?
yeah, and he had Charlie Kirk out on it as his first guest. And I'm like listening to this guy, I'm like, dude, this guy is such a chameleon. He wants to portray out that he is like kind of centered left type thing. This guy has nothing to do with that. He has an agenda and he has aspirations. He has nothing to do with the center, and he has nothing to do with trying to be balanced.
So, yeah. If putting on airs for his show, maybe reach a larger audience, who knows? But now that the Democrat Party is, well, I don't know what they're doing, but their failure with Kamala and Biden, I wonder if they're going to turn to someone like Newsom as maybe a front runner. I have a pretty strong suspicion that he might be maybe in 2024. Well, we're past 2024.
I don't know. I don't know who they'd pick up for the Democratic nominee. I'm sure that there are pretty stabilized people who don't sound so fringe, but every time I hear the ones that are popular, like AOC or people like that, they come off like you're not really in touch. You're in touch with a certain demographic, but you're not really in touch with people. They start talking stuff like, wow, this is not constitutional, or that's not constitutional, or whatever it is. And they don't really seem to understand how government works, but yet they're in government. And it's scary to me because they're making decisions out there and passing laws that I don't think will line up with the Constitution at all. And it's not just them. I think that there are a lot of rhinos out there doing the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I've ever been to New York, but I do have a suspicion that maybe she does represent her district or her group of people that voted her in.
Oh, I definitely believe that she represents them in a large way.
It kind of goes back to this identity crisis of what it means to be a new American. There's people now, a new generation that's come up, that has completely rejected the foundation of what America is. And I think that to a degree there's some flexibility, but our whole idea of the Constitution was there are things that you cannot change or cannot do, and they want to change those. And I really question them. I go, if you don't like it here, there's other nations out there that can cater more to what you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And the very least, it's not that expensive to take a plane ticket somewhere else. It's a bit of a pain, but go visit somewhere else.
That's kind of like the ideology of, I support Ukraine and I want to give all my tax dollars to Ukraine and everybody else's tax dollars, and we should stand with them. But I'm not going to go fight for them, even though I want everybody else to. That's the kind of mentality that I think needs to be addressed. Is if you're going to say crap about your country, then don't live here. Just like you said, if you want to stand up for something else that you believe in, put your money where your mouth is.
Oh, speaking of that, now, if this actually happens, I'm all for it. Because there's this talk about getting that $5,000+ back because of all the cuts happening. And I really do think that there should be an option that instead of you receiving that $5,000, you can go donate that somewhere. Maybe donate that to Ukraine. Maybe let the people put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, that's what they want to do with it. I think that's fair enough.
If you had a Ukraine flag on your social media, I think that $5,000 should go to Ukraine.
Yeah, right. Can you imagine that? The people who love entitlements, who stand up for that, they'll be like, "What are you talking about? That's my money. Why would I give my money?" Oh, now it becomes real. That money comes from the government, but it's actually your money. But you're willing for the government to give your money away someplace else, but you're not willing for you to give that money someplace else. You just got this messed up understanding, and that is where our problem in our nation is. They have a messed up understanding of how the world ticks.
Yeah. I think one of our issues at hand, and I kind of go back to blaming social media for this, is that prior to the internet, I don't think we were ever really meant to have a full understanding of what was going on geopolitical stuff. I could have been just fine focusing in on what happened in my little valley, my little city or town, and living my life happy like that. But now we're being inundated with stuff happening on a global scale, and people don't really understand other cultures or nations and how things happen on a global scale. Maybe it'd be better if you just focus on what happens in your backyard.
Oh my gosh. You know what you're asking for? You're asking for people to just focus on what's important. Family, faith, community, right? Yeah.
Everyone wants to throw their hat in on something that's happening on the other side of the world without even understanding that culture. It's a narcissism that seems bred exclusively in Americans, where they think that everyone acts like Americans. But hey, you know what? No, they don't.
That's like when you watch Hollywood stars feed in their opinions on things, and you're like, what are you talking about? You have no idea what you're even talking about. You sound like you're reading from a script from a B-rated movie. You sound ridiculous. And that's how a lot of Americans are. They say, oh, we should do this or we should do that. And then when you watch these TikTokers walk around, hey, do you know where Iraq is? And they're like, I have no idea where Iraq is. It's like, but you're qualified to give an opinion about this. Really. Hey, everybody has an opinion about something. Now, our opinion is just about our perspective as Americans, about what we hear. But come on now. I mean, you've got to have something where you're educated on some level to have an opinion. Because if you're just giving an opinion without any understanding of how it works, you sound like, oh my God, I'm living in that society today. They don't know. They
Yeah,
just give opinions and they have no idea what they're giving an opinion about, but they think they do.
yeah. I think the worst thing that anyone can do is that have a firm-rooted stance on what they think the world is. And when they're given new information or the ability to progress, they refuse. They double down on a thought, even though something might be contrary to that. Everyone should be able to be capable of learning and being on. But I've seen it too, where people do those screening reviews and they go, well, no, the data shows otherwise, and then they just refuse to acknowledge or believe. And I think that's not healthy either.
Yeah, that idea
It's,
is just the cultural differences and how people don't even understand and they think like Americans, they think other people think like they do. They just have no clue. And Americans are just so naive on so many levels. And the young ones, they think that they know how the world works, and they're just so adamant about what is right and wrong without an understanding of how mechanics work in the world.
you know, I forgot where I read this. I think it was I think it was back in like the 17th or 18th century, where it was a pretty big deal that when you would join a college, that part of your curriculum was to spend time abroad to expand your horizons. And I know it's a little easier in Europe because it's a lot smaller and you have a lot of different cultures crammed into a small place. But even if you were to just spend time on different parts of America too, and maybe it doesn't have to be another country, but America has a lot of different cultures too, and it would be a good thing to see what life is like beyond just your, well, the population centers are all in cities, so get out of the cities and just see what life is really like outside of them. You know, I think that's at least part of the issue is that I see a lot of ideology looking down on the Midwest people or the Appalachian people or what. I mean, you see it even in older movies where if you got a Southern draw, you're almost depicted as less IQ or something. But
Yeah.
it's you spend 6 months down there and actually get to know these people and formulate a different opinion rather than just what you see through your glass screen.
Yeah, I mean that just seems like all the old innuendos about certain caste. You talk about people. I mean, in my generation, you talk about Alabama, or it's almost like talking about Mormons. You know, you're talking about, oh yeah, you know, those guys, how they breed, that kind of thing. You know, those people are some of the nicest people I've ever dealt with. I deal with those guys down in Mississippi and Alabama all the time, and they're always so polite. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. They just talk in such a nice, respectful way. And the guys from Tennessee, they're all like really friendly. They seemingly are very respectful too. Very different culture from California. Everybody's just like, yeah, dude, you know, thanks a lot, man. It's really just a very different culture. And to experience that, as any young person should, it would really widen their horizons.
Yeah, you don't have to travel abroad. We have a lot of different cultures and ways of living right here in the. I mean, the United States is it's a very large landmass. Unfortunately, we don't need to have a visa to get through all the different borders. Although there might be some arguments about certain safe places to travel in the United States anymore.
Yeah, I hear that there's this whole idea of a national reciprocity for firearms is coming through, and I'm kind of looking forward to seeing if that's going to pass. That'd be really nice if the country could become a constitutional carry nation rather than a state.
It's sad that that even has to be said too.
right?
It's. I was just talking to someone, and they're like, "You imagine if people of, let's say, 1890, if they had a glimpse into what we were like now, how how quickly they'd throw tables over, or even just the silent generation. You know, they fought through well, the bloodiest wars of recent era, outside of probably Ukraine, and I can't imagine them living in the United States and going, well, you can't say whatever you want, and you can't carry a firearm wherever you want, and you can't travel certain places. That just I can't imagine them tolerating this. Is it the frog boiling in the kettle? What is it that made us just accept what we have now?
I think a lot of laws that are built on fear instead of building on addressing cultural issues.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt you. I was just wanting to add, maybe it's also because of the fact that we've become so complicit in our comfortable lives. We are so blessed with abundance that maybe we can tolerate these things that we don't think we need, because why go through the hassle of potentially being politically prosecuted or going to jail when you still have what you have?
And
I,
I think you hit it right on the head. It's about the boiling pot with the frog in it, right? The idea that our liberties are being stripped away little by little, and it's culturally acceptable to remove those liberties is outstanding that people are accepting that. It's almost like, oh my gosh, really? It is so unbelievable how many of our rights and privileges have been already stripped away from us. It bugs the heck out of me that the Republican known as George Bush passed the Patriot Act. There was a lot of resistance when that came in. But man, can you imagine how many laws that have been built on top of that that has been abused in our privacy of everything we do? If that law never even came around, how much more liberty would we have today with our privacy?
speaking of that, you want to talk about a lasting impact on Trump's legacy? If he could undo the Patriot Act, that would be, that's almost too much.
There's no way that they'll ever do it because that kind of control gives them a lot of assets to be able to deal with. Oh, but the terrorist, and we can spy on these people, but it's so broad that it can spy on Americans. And
Yeah,
that's what their complaint was back then, but they said, no, we are not going to do that. But then you take a look today.
the definition of terrorism seems to change with the times.
Exactly. Now you start up burning down a car dealership, you're a terrorist today.
Well,
Nowhere in our history were people burning down car dealerships.
I think the funny thing is, I don't think they're classified them as terrorists either. Although, by what the original definition, that's an act of terror, terrorizing the American public because you drive a Tesla.
I guess Pam Bondi's going to be charging them with terrorism.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
20 years. She's going to go. They caught the dude down in Texas. So who did that one in Las Vegas? And I guess they're going to try to charge him with like 20 years, whatever, if the charges stick. I don't know. Not my monkey, not my circus. It's
yeah.
like you do what you do. But if you're going to destroy somebody's property, my gosh, you're lucky that that's Pam Bondi caught you instead of you know some dude out in the woods. Destroy that dude's house, and now he caught you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that they were actually. Well, that's good. That's good they caught the guy. It's good that that's. I think the whole Tesla thing is going to come and go pretty quick because I don't think they're tolerating it in the same way that they would have previously.
Oh. Can you imagine those kooks? Oh, what are they going to go do next? SpaceX? You're going to go destroy that? Go blow up a rocket? You go try that. Knock yourself out, you moron. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing with X. Oh, I'm going to go out and start doing whatever they do over there. Why would you even attack that dude's stuff? It's so moronic. Just to make a statement.
I think it's kind of funny the dichotomy of what would be considered protesting, which destroying property is definitely not protesting. But it made me think back to when they started boycotting Bud Light. And that was it. You just don't buy the product. There you go. Don't shop at Target, right? You don't need to, I mean, I'm sure there were some out there. There's crazies on both sides, but you didn't see in mass people destroying Targets, you know?
It's kind of funny. I was just thinking about this. Is when you get groups of people together and you get them agitated. It doesn't matter what part of the spectrum you're on, political spectrum. When you get them together and you get some people in there to agitate them, they're going to get agitated. And once they're around a big group of people who get agitated, they're going to do anything, do crazy. And you can point out to January 6th, or you can talk about Portland, you can talk about Seattle, it doesn't really matter. What makes it a difference is the groups of people that gather together are funded a lot by left-leaning groups, and then they deposit them in certain cities to go ahead and protest. And then there's the agitator that gets them all wound up, and then they get crazy. They do it more on the left than the right because the right doesn't go out and protest all the time. There's only a few people, they'll hold up their signs, anti-abortion.
Yeah.
There's just not big groups of them. But there's always big groups of Democrats that end up protesting, and that's when these problems start shooting up. So they're always stigmatized as they're going to go burn down their city.
Yeah. Well, there was a clip that I guess was going semi-viral of one of those street interviewers, and he asked this protester is getting paid. They get paid somewhere between $500 and $1,000 for that's that's a lot of money. It'd be pretty easy to get people to go protesting if you're paying them that kind of.
Why do conservatives not do that? Because conservatives tend to be conservative, cheap.
Yeah.
Right? And Democrats, they don't care about money. That's why we have national debts the way we do, because they don't think like that. They think about, let's spend money and get this accomplished, and that's what they want to take care of. Conservatives are just like, man, I ain't spending my money on that. I'm spending on, groceries.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, good news is eggs are down lower. I don't think they're as low as they were before, but they're definitely lower than when Trump first got in. So, yeah, it was $24 for 5 dozen at the store, which that's not great. But I mean, better than 40 or 50.
$24 for freaking eggs. Man, 20 for how many?
5 dozen.
5 dozen eggs?
I know.
Gosh. Oh.
It's still cheaper to buy them from the guy down the street, but I mean, at least it's.
What's the temperature you have to cook out the bird flu? I mean, fry the eggs and make sure you say, okay, we're only scrambling these things. Cook it up. Sorry, I don't want to spend that much money on eggs. Oh, but you're going to get sick. Really? Well, what are the chances of that?
Oh, speaking of getting sick, one of the things I saw for the state health thing was a measles outbreak.
Oh yeah, the measles.
I know that's been kind of making rounds across the nation, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's something they're acting like it's a big deal. I thought it was you just get the measles and move on, just like you get chicken pox and move on.
So they had the German measles that were pretty bad, and that's when my mom was young. She said that could really do some damage, either with your reproductive system or something. I forgot what it was, but I mean, I was just watching this old Brady Bunch episode on TikTok where they're like, "Oh, I got the measles," and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you got how many days off school do you get off?" And that was it. It wasn't a big deal. It was like the kids were fine with it, parents were fine with it. Today, oh my gosh, you get a paper cut and everybody freaks out. You need these antibiotics because you're getting infected and your finger will fall off.
Yeah, it's fear mongering, I think, but it feels like they try and take every. Again, I think it's just the ability to blow information up on online and push an agenda, but not everything is into. It's all they're always acting like Chicken Little. Every little thing. I'm worried because when the real thing happens, I mean, no one's going to believe them.
I just wonder what would happen in our society if it started breaking down on a real level. And people make movies about this and they think about it, all these like end of the world scenarios. But in a real situation, how would people respond if there was another pandemic that was really serious? And people are kind of on the fence of, is it really going to be as bad, or we're never going to do that again? But if a real serious issue came up, how would the populace deal with it? I don't think they could.
I don't think so because I don't want to minimize. Excuse me. I don't want to minimize COVID because there. I mean, I don't think it was handled right at all, and there were some deaths, which I mean, we know people who passed from it, but I don't. It was more psychological than anything, and I think more of a testing ground on what rights they could strip away from us. But if you had a real, I mean, it was the same death rate as a little over the flu. I think it wasn't anything. I mean, it was bad, but it wasn't anything like the. You imagine if like the Black Plague came through and like, oh, there goes like
Exactly.
40% of American population.
You get the plague that comes through. Now we're talking like really scary stuff, especially if they made some hybrid, whacked out variant of it in some lab and that got out.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was kind of like the whole thing with COVID, which was no one really knew, but the whole gain of function research on it was like,
Exactly.
why were they doing that? Why did Fauci lie about that? Yeah,
So all these questions that come up about how scary that is, because if they let something out intentionally, then they probably were thinking about how it would be mitigated. But the realities come down, what if they pulled another stunt like that and they couldn't control it? And it really was out of control. Now we've got
I mean, that's what I thought COVID was at first.
umbrella corporation type.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're offering you vaccines and immune boosters for. I was driving down Highway 90, and I saw an ad about cancer prevention, but it was like, get your yearly booster for cancer prevention. I'm like, it sounds neat in concept, and if it helps you, that's great. But I also don't want to have an umbrella corporation or I Am Legend moment.
It's kind of funny when you think about it. They have to market it. And what a great place to market. It's on a billboard, right?
Yeah.
So you just see it and it sticks in your mind. And people have such a fear of cancer anymore because it's so prevalent. Everywhere you go, there's somebody's cancer. But yet, they've found a way to where it's like, I'm so much in fear of this, of catching it. I need to get this shot.
It's like a joke that made across my feed where the guy was talking about high blood pressure, and he was going to the doctor, and the doctor's like, just take this pill for the rest of your life. It'll help manage that. And he goes, well, how about we treat the symptoms rather than the cause?
What a concept. I think there's like Simpson episodes and stuff like that about that whole concept. Deal with always want to deal with the symptom and not the cause. because the cause makes a lot of money in the United States. The cause is an ingredient list of Doritos and cupcakes and box cakes, and you're like, man, that tastes so good, but my body really can't cope with this stuff.
You know, no one likes cancer, but maybe don't eat the foods that give you cancer. But and I'm all for companies making, I mean, I'm a capitalist. I want to make money. I want you to make money. But how do you think we address an issue where these corporations that have just taken that to the far extreme?
And it's kind of funny that you say that because this has been going on since for years. I remember that movie Die Hard.
The Christmas one?
Yeah, the Christmas one. This is how long ago it was. Are you gonna eat that? It was a Twinkie, and they made the reference of how long Twinkies last. This has been going on since the '80s. Then that's as far as my memory starts going back because I don't remember about food products even before then. But as far as that moment, it was like, gosh, Twinkies had that long-term life expectancy. You know, before in the '70s, it was eating malted meal and all the other weird stuff that our parents used to make us eat. We had Cheerios, but it wasn't like the Cheerios that they have today. Like what that lady found a bunch of lead in the Cheerios. That
Huh.
was kind of gross.
Lead in the Cheerios.
Yeah, that was kind of a weird deal. And then they ended up taking out her little TikTok or whatever on it. But it was just kind of like, gosh, that's so weird. The food that they feed us with is like homogenized poison.
Really? Yeah, they're not trying to kill us per se, but they're definitely trying to make us weak, dependent,
Nobody ever questions
sick.
why there's so much cancer today. When I was a kid, very few people had cancer. Now it's like, gosh, everywhere.
Or just the fact, well, I don't know if I'm a great example of this, but I rarely get sick, and when I do, it's pretty short term. But I always feel like everyone I see when they get sick consecutively, frequently, and they're sick for like a week at a time. I don't think that's normal,
Yeah.
but I see that's more normal than not, even outside of my immediate social circle, which is,
And if there's older people who listen to this, it'd be like, when you get sick, you just work through it unless you're down. Like you're throwing up, you got food poisoning, you got something. My old generation would be like, man, you just got to go. Because mom and dad would make you go to school sick, and that's just how it was. Today, it seems like, man, I don't feel very good. I'll just stay home. And people wonder how their jobs don't work out so well. Or I guess, I don't know. I don't know how they handle young kids today with not showing up because they're sick or whatever. But it does seem like people get sick much easier today and they don't show up to work. From what I see.
it definitely doesn't help when you're just eating motor oil known as canola oil for every meal. All right. Well, that's going to probably be wrapping up for this.
There's a lot to edit out of that.